All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Dwight Carter. I'm the Director of Student Support Systems here for Eastland-Fairfield Career and Technical School District. Tonight is the launch of our Community Conversation Series, and we have a very special guest with us. We have Dr. Beth Weinstock from BirdieLight. Beth is a physician, a local physician here in Ohio. She's a mother of four who, unfortunately, she had lost her son to an accidental overdose of fentanyl. And from that, Dr. Weinstock and her daughter Olivia launched BirdieLight in honor of her son to educate students, families, anyone actually on the dangers of fentanyl. She currently works with EFCTS Health, where she supports individuals with HIV and AIDS and hepatitis C. She has spoken to thousands of schools, and we're honored to have her with us tonight. So, Dr. Weinstock.
Thank you. Thanks so much. You can leave that there. Well, hi, everyone. We've got a small group, and that's fine. I like that because we can keep it very personal and ask questions, throw your hand up if something comes up that you want to ask about in the moment. As Dwight mentioned, we're here together tonight because something horrible has happened, something unimaginable. And that thing is happening to countless families across America every single day, to the tune of over 200 Americans per day are dying due to fentanyl alone. So when I speak to young students, high school, college students, mostly in Central Ohio, but across the country, I acknowledge that to them. I say, we're about to speak about something that's incredibly heavy and sad, and we can't get around that. But what I can do is promise students that by the time they leave my presentation, they're going to have an action plan. They're going to have concrete knowledge that they can take out into the world and use to keep themselves and their friends safe. So I am here today so you can learn about BirdieLight, which means learning about fentanyl, which means learning about my son, Eli Weinstock, who died in March of 2021 while he was a sophomore at American University. Eli was a kid just like any kid. He graduated locally here from Bexley High School. He played tennis. He was the funniest person I've ever known. When he was a sophomore in high school, he made an Instagram account with clips of video games, and he overlaid his voice, funny commentary. And at one point, he had over 200,000 followers. Made everyone around him laugh. He loved cooking. He loved Grater's milkshakes. He loved his family. So that word fentanyl is not the right word by which I want you to remember Eli. In the same way, you would never want to be remembered only for the last hour of your life or for the weapon that killed you. I don't want Eli to only be associated with fentanyl. So what is the right word? I think it's kind-hearted or big-hearted, which my son most certainly was, and we lead our efforts with BirdieLight with a big, kind heart. I'm only here to save lives and to enlist you, who are all people who are adjacent to young people, to enlist you in that fight to save lives also. And when I speak to young people, I mostly compliment them because they are the most creative, savvy generation we've ever seen. They can do things and think about things that we were never presented with. Sometimes that's not such a good thing, but I also think it makes them very open to new ideas and very creative and savvy. So I enlist them in this fight, and I ask them to fight in Eli's name. So I'm going to tell you the story of BirdieLight, which is a news story because all stories for my family started over on March 3rd of 2021 when Eli went home to get ready to go out with his buddies in Washington, D.C. He had a 3.7 GPA. He had an internship lined up for the summer. We had just seen him on a family vacation 10 days before he died. He wasn't struggling with substance use disorder. He wasn't struggling with addiction. In fact, I think Eli as a mom, I think Eli was making the right decisions 99% of the time. Yet, within an hour of arriving at his apartment, he had collapsed and died from an accidental fentanyl ingestion. The Washington, D.C. coroner found fentanyl in his system, and the only other thing in his system was kratom. Is everyone familiar with kratom? It's popular with young people, so we should learn about it. It's a plant-based herbal supplement that's legal in Ohio and Washington, D.C. It has some calming effect, opioid-like qualities, but not as powerful, of course. And you can get it at CBD stores, head shops. So Eli had two things in his system. We'll never know if Eli perhaps had taken some kratom maybe the day before, and that on the day of his death, he took a pill, we're assuming, that was pure fentanyl, or on the day of his death, if he took something he thought was something else, and it had kratom and fentanyl in it. We'll never know the answer to that. But now that I have laid all this heaviness on you, shared it with you, I want you to think for a second. Think back to when you were 15 to 25. And try to think about any bad decisions you might have made, in-the-moment decisions, impulsive decisions. And I want to stress to you that I get that because I made my own very, very, very bad decisions. But the difference for this generation is that the consequences are so much higher. They have no wiggle room to make quick decisions or be impulsive. And I hate that for this generation. They just don't have any room to make mistakes. And as you know, you guys are around young people more than me, we are never going to have bad decision-making or impulsivity skip a generation. It's actually developmentally normal for them to make bad decisions sometimes. And we all hope, particularly as parents, that the worst decision they make might be a really unfortunate tattoo, or a change in hair color, or maybe they change their music and you're not a big fan, or whatever it happens to be. But the truth is a lot of these bad decisions involve drugs or alcohol. I have 4 kids, I'll show you, 3 of whom are living. And each one of these young people have displayed to me a different relationship with risk. And I would imagine with your own families or your own students that you can see it. Who are the risk takers? Who are the kids that are going to grab for that pill or powder in the moment at a party? And sometimes it surprises you who might do that. My oldest daughter, who's 24, has never taken a pill or powder in her life, and she never will. And I'd like to think after what we've been through that my younger 2 never will also. So here we are in 2021, this graph goes up to, but we don't have up-to-date 2022 data. But that gray line you see skyrocketing off the graph there, that's fentanyl alone. In 2015, you start to see that gray line take off into the sky. The 2022 numbers are higher than 2021. All those other colorful lines you see on there are all other substances, including other opiates like heroin, prescription opioids like pain pills, and then methamphetamine, I don't know why they have antidepressants on there, benzodiazepines. So the gray line is fentanyl alone, and we started to see that skyrocketing off the graph in 2015. Let me make a couple striking comparisons for you. This is maybe some of you are old enough to sort of understand where I'm coming from here. This is the greatest public health crisis of my generation, the HIV and AIDS crisis. At the peak of that crisis in 1995, we lost approximately 42,000 Americans due to complications of HIV. I line these slides up intentionally because in 2015 in our country, for drug-related fatalities, we were already above the 40,000 mark, climbing to last year's 12-month total, 111,000 people in 1 year. Another striking comparison, the Vietnam War Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. has 58,000 names on it. for soldiers who lost their lives at the peak of their productivity, and the future was ahead of them. 58,000 names. This is for an entire war that lasted almost 10 years. So last year alone, drug-related fatalities in America, 111,000 people. It's the greatest number ever recorded on American soil, and I keep saying that year after year because it keeps going up. So when I speak to young people, I often will show slides of people that they might recognize, people that have died from an accidental fentanyl ingestion, just so we can have some sort of pop culture references. This is Mac Miller, who on the day of his death thought he was ingesting cocaine, but it had fentanyl in it, and that was what caused his death. Prince was accustomed to taking pain pills every day. He had a chronic pain issue, apparently, but on the day of his death, he was given a counterfeit oxycodone or hydrocodone, and it had fentanyl in it, and that's how he died. Michael K. Williams of The Wire died from a fentanyl ingestion. Tom Petty. You're probably thinking when I speak to young people, no one knows who these people are. That might be true. Lil Peep, Juice WRLD, all of these musicians mostly that young people know all died from an accidental fentanyl ingestion. And like I said, this is happening daily to over 200 Americans per day. So 6 months after Eli died, my daughter Olivia and I sat by his gravesite, which is very close to here, right off of Refugee Road, and we said, these numbers are staggering. It is our imperative to do something about it. Because, you know, this is the greatest public health crisis of their generation. We don't lose this many young people to car accidents, cancer, COVID. The only thing that gets close to fentanyl deaths in age 15 to 24, they're sort of equal in number, is gun-related deaths. So both major public health crises. And I'm going to talk in a second about fentanyl, what it is, I promise, and where it's found. But I want to say also, as a grieving mother, I have a lot of anger about this issue, because those two slides I could go back to at the peak of, or not even at the peak, early in the HIV and AIDS crisis, when we had lost about 15,000 people to complications of HIV, the Surgeon General sent a flyer to every mailbox in the United States, every single mailbox, warning of the dangers of HIV and how do you stay safe from it. Where's our fentanyl flyer? Vietnam War. At the peak of that crisis, which I think of as a public health crisis, there were protests on every campus in this country. Where are protests? And I don't have the answer, but I suspect it's because of stigma. We like to stigmatize people associated with opioids. We like to think of them as out there, not in my community, not in my school, not in my family, and then we can keep ignoring the problem. But we don't just have in our country a substance use disorder problem, opioid use disorder problem, which has been in the news for 2 decades now. People might have grown weary of that crisis, but we also have this newer crisis, you could call it a poisoning crisis, where people are dying from fentanyl ingestion when they weren't intending and had no knowledge that they were about to take fentanyl. So I understand those are apples and oranges, Vietnam War, HIV and AIDS, but I just use that to illustrate the gravity of our crisis and what we're not doing about it. And I want to point out, too, that my daughter and I alone, we can't really stop all young people from experimenting with substances. And we're never going to be able to stop the flow of illicit substances across the borders and moving around in the illicit drug trade in our country, which is a billions of dollars industry. But what we can do, what you guys can do, is create a commonplace conversation so that we have a community of caring that says to kids, let's talk about fentanyl. Just the same way we say, let's talk about vaping, let's teach about sexual health, let's talk about wearing seatbelts. This has to be so much a part of our commonplace health conversation that no one blinks an eye at it anymore. And I will say to you, across the board, nearly every high school I speak to says they have no focused fentanyl education in their high school, despite the CDC says now that from age 18 to 45, fentanyl is the leading preventable cause of death for all Americans right now. age 18 to 45, nobody has a high school regular conversation about fentanyl. You might catch a high school here and there, but it's not routine and it's not mandated. Although 4 states have recently mandated fentanyl education statewide in all high schools. So I'm hoping we can keep pressuring Ohio to do it also. So what we do is we try to catch young people in this middle ground before they've tried a pill or a powder, or perhaps they're using something occasionally. You'd be surprised how many college students tell me that they occasionally try some cocaine, or cocaine's pretty popular on college campuses right now. Or maybe they know someone who occasionally takes a pill, a Xanax, an Adderall, a hydrocodone, an oxycodone. We chose intentionally not to sort of dive into treating substance use disorder, mostly because I'm not qualified, but also because there are people already working in that space. And what we found is no one is talking to kids before they try anything about fentanyl danger. And here's what kids are telling us. Oh, that's just some photos of us around the country. Although this one on the bottom is at Hilliard High School. We educated 3 different high schools in Hilliard. Some of these are at different sororities and fraternities. That's a high school in LA. That's doing a tabling event on a college campus. So here's what young people are telling us. About 50% of kids that we survey after we talk to them are aware that fentanyl can be present in fake or counterfeit pills. And I always teach them what a fake or counterfeit pill is before I ask them the question. 50% are aware that fentanyl can be present in cocaine. That's scary because right now 18% of all cocaine in Ohio has fentanyl in it. 18%. So half of the kids age 15 to 25 who are trying a line of cocaine for the first time at that party or this bar, 50% of them have no idea that 18% of that cocaine that they might be getting has fentanyl in it. So these are what the numbers we're trying to change. And 96% of students we survey tell us before we spoke to them, they had had no fentanyl education and did not know how to stay safe from it. So finally, I promised, what is fentanyl? This is a brief review. I'm not going to go through a chemistry lesson, I promise. But fentanyl is an opioid. Opioid just is an umbrella term for a lot of medicines, some legal, some illegal, that can control pain and also can control or can create a euphoria. So they all act on the same receptors in the brain. So pain control, euphoria, along with some other unpleasant side effects. But when people are seeking out opioids in a recreational or daily use setting, it's because they are seeking that euphoria. Some are more stronger than others. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine or even heroin. So fentanyl creates a euphoria fast, intense, but also the problem with that is there's this razor-thin margin between the euphoria and a loss of consciousness, particularly in someone who's unaccustomed to taking opioids every day. There's 2 interesting things about fentanyl. One is that it can be legal and it can be illegal. So if you go to the hospital and you need a colonoscopy, they're most likely going to give you some fentanyl through an IV. If a kid breaks a bone in the ER at Children's, they're going to give them fentanyl to set that fracture. But that's given on the level of micrograms. Out in the illicit drug trade and what's being sold today that people are dying from is on the level of milligrams, so 1,000 times stronger. Okay, so don't be afraid of fentanyl if you see it in a hospital setting. It's totally legit. They have oxygen nearby. They have Narcan right there. So it's safe, but it needs to be regulated. So most opioids, the second interesting thing about fentanyl is most opioids come from this poppy plant, the sticky stuff on the outside, but not fentanyl. Fentanyl is synthetic, meaning you can make it from a few chemical ingredients in a lab anywhere. You don't need agriculture, you don't need a growing season. So fentanyl is being created in a lot of places, even nationally. It's not all being imported. It's relatively cheap to make. And the thing is, it creates that euphoria. So you can slip a little fentanyl into another substance, say an oxycodone that's a counterfeit oxycodone, slip a little fentanyl in there, and the person who bought that from you is going to get a much more dramatic euphoria. So it keeps your business model going. it keeps someone returning. And then if someone's returning enough, they will most likely develop an opioid use disorder. And then they can't not take it because it makes them sick to not take it, you know. So there's this market for that intense euphoria, but the thing is you have to survive it first. Yeah.
Substance use disorder, is that different than addiction?
No, same thing. Yeah. Substance use disorder sort of encompasses all substances, but then sort of more granular people will say opioid use disorder. And by that, they mean that the person's struggling with an addiction to heroin, fentanyl, oxycodone, amongst others. But those are the big three. Actually, heroin shouldn't even be called heroin anymore because most of it is all fentanyl now. So you don't even really see that much heroin anymore. It's mostly powder fentanyl that then is cooked and usually injected, although there are some heroin ingestibles like pills. I've never seen that, but I've heard they're out there. But again, that pill would not really be a lot of heroin. It would be mostly fentanyl. So this is a slide by the DEA. This is considered 2 milligrams of fentanyl on the tip of a pencil. And the DEA says this is considered a sort of an average lethal amount of fentanyl. Okay, so that depends on your tolerance. If you're using opioids daily, this might be sort of not even average, below average dose, but it just depends on if you're accustomed to opioids. So this powder can be slipped into other substances like I mentioned, and I'll just go through the list with you. Like I said, heroin is almost pure fentanyl now. This is slipped into counterfeit pills, and I'll show you some pictures of those. Counterfeit pills include counterfeit oxycodone, also known as M30s, counterfeit Xanax. And when I say counterfeit, this means someone's making these pills to look like the real thing. And I'm going to show you pictures of that. Counterfeit Adderall, it's popular. Also, when young people go to music festivals and concerts, sometimes they do Molly, also known as, we used to call it ecstasy or MDMA. Now it's mostly called Molly, and it also can have fentanyl in it now. Methamphetamine, dramatic increase in people who have been using methamphetamine, maybe even just sort of in a social, recreational way, you know, not daily, but they're using it, you know, and suddenly about 2018, you start to see these spike in methamphetamine-related fatalities, and that's all due to fentanyl. And I mentioned cocaine. 18% of cocaine in Ohio has fentanyl in it. Now, someone always asks me at this point, what about weed? What about THC? And you'll see isolated media reports of that. Like it's a powder, it's on the leaves. Those isolated stories are hard to confirm. The CDC, NIH, no one's really putting out hard and fast data on how often that's happening. It's really rare. So my organization, because we want to remain a data-driven, evidence-based organization, we focus on the pills and powders. But then some kid always asks me, but what do I do? Should I smoke the weed or not? You know, they try to pin me to the wall. And I said, listen, if you are ever going to use any kind of THC product, get it from a dispensary, because that's not going to have fentanyl in it. It's regulated. It's inspected. I don't say that in an auditorium setting, but they always ask the question. I'm like, well, if you have to use it, just don't buy it from someone you don't know. Go to a dispensary. So we'll see. I mean, the weed in 2 years might have tons of fentanyl in it. Like 2 years ago, I wasn't saying that fake Xanax had fentanyl in it, but now it does, you know. So it evolves. All right. So here's some fake pills. The pill on the left is a fake oxycodone, also known as an M30. The pill on the right is a legitimate pharmaceutical oxycodone, which would mean it's pure oxycodone, maybe with some stabilizers in it. The pill on the left is a counterfeit pill. Anywhere from 20 to 40% of fake oxycodones in our country right now have fentanyl in them. It depends geographically. The DEA says 60% of all counterfeit pills have fentanyl in them, but then state-by-state data sort of refutes that and says it's more like 20 to 40%. So I never know the one to pin my hat on, but I just tell kids, let's split the difference. 40%, just don't take them, because that's, you know, Russian roulette, or even more scary than that. This is a counterfeit Xanax on the left, On the right is a real Xanax. This is used pharmaceutically to treat anxiety. I've prescribed these myself. One Xanax has never killed anybody. But the pill on the left, again, has a very high chance of having fentanyl in it, most likely a lethal dose of fentanyl in a person who's not accustomed to taking opioids every day. This is a pill that you'll see reports of people dying from a fentanyl ingestion because they ordered Xanax bars from Snapchat or TikTok, and it shows up. The kid maybe checks on his phone, oh, it looks like a real Xanax, and of course it's not. And usually what happens is young people take one of these to relax when they're by themselves. So alone, taking a fentanyl-laced pill can be deadly. And this also is a counterfeit Adderall on the left. On the right is one version of Adderall. There's lots of different versions and generics. But again, Adderall is a commonly prescribed medicine. It's considered very safe. But the pill on the left is a fake Adderall. And so you can imagine a scenario where young people, you know, they're going to a club, they're going to a party, and they want to stay up late. They want to stay up all night, you know? And so they might take this, I mean, I don't know like what the terminology is, but they might take this, drink a, I don't know, let's say like a Red Bull maybe, and they're off to their party. Maybe they want to stay up all night to study, you know, in a college setting or even high school. So this one scares me a lot. And of course, cocaine is a white powder. Fentanyl is a white powder. People can't tell when they have a baggie of cocaine if it has fentanyl in it. It doesn't have a smell. It doesn't have a taste. So before I talk about these, so, you know, what do we do with all this data and information? Talk, you know, the list, Molly, ecstasy, MDMA, fake Xanax, fake Adderall, fake oxycodone. I just repeat that so it's in your memory when you're talking to young people. And sometimes especially when I'm talking to healthcare professionals, I think sometimes all you need to do to start the conversation is just say, hey, what do you know about the fentanyl epidemic? And if they say, I know a lot, I know a little, then you could say, did you know that right now, you can say most of the cocaine in Ohio has fentanyl in it, or you can say 18%, whatever you say, at least you're planting a seed, you know? And these are just easy conversations to have with young people. And when I'm talking to young people, I say, you take that data and you tell your buddy at the next party you go to, and then they'll tell someone, hopefully. Is anyone familiar with a fentanyl test strip? You ever seen one? They're becoming more commonplace, definitely passed out at public health departments. You'll see them like Columbus Pride, Columbus Taco Fest, music festivals. There's usually now, and there wasn't a year ago, there's usually now a booth passing these out, okay? So this fentanyl test strip acts in the same way that like a pregnancy test or a COVID test acts. The water travels up the strip and it lights up positive or negative for fentanyl. So let's say a kid has a pill, a Xanax that they're about to take, but they want to test it first. They crush the whole pill in a little bit of water, like the top of a 2-liter soda bottle, and they put the pill in that water, put the strip in a minute and a half, the water travels up and it lights up positive or negative for fentanyl. Of course, I encourage kids, if it's positive ever, just get rid of it. Don't take it. If it's negative, and, you know, I try not to like really go too deep in this topic unless schools want me to, but if the test is negative, that water that has the pill in it, they can drink that. Because a lot of people ask me, but wait, they just destroyed the pill they want to take. Why would they do that? You know, but just so for your information, if someone has crushed an Adderall, an oxycodone, or a Xanax, they can drink it after it's crushed in water. I tell students that, mostly college students, because I don't want them to not test thinking, oh, I would just destroy my pill. So I always want them to have all the information. These strips are 92 to 96% sensitive at picking up fentanyl in any pill or powder. Pretty good numbers, not perfect. But I give the kids a couple tips in a few minutes, a safety net. that will get them up to the 100%. Okay, so I'll share that with you in a second. These are some instructions we staple on the strips. I have some samples here tonight. We pass these out. We do it from our website, mail order. People can order 5 to 10 strips from our website for free. They cost us, with the stapling and the card and everything, anywhere from 60 cents to $1 per strip. We usually give out 3 to 5 per student, but they can always get more. Up until last year, these were considered drug paraphernalia in Ohio, because a long time ago in the early 90s, they passed a drug paraphernalia law that said anything associated with substances is considered, it's a misdemeanor, but it was considered drug paraphernalia, and that included testing supplies. So they pulled that off the books just this last year, which we were pretty excited about. Okay, you guys know probably a little more about Narcan. Naloxone, this is an opioid reversal agent that you can squirt into someone's nose, one side, one squirt, and if they have opioids in their brain on those receptors, this solution will kick the opioid off the receptor so that the person who perhaps is on the ground struggling to breathe can start breathing on their own. Usually that process takes anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes. I always encourage anyone who needs to give someone Narcan to call 911, particularly because, if there's enough opioid up there, they can sort of slip back into unconsciousness, and you want to have, the EMTs there for that. You can get this for free from our organization. We have some samples here tonight. Harm Reduction Ohio mails it to people. Music festivals, on campus, tabling events. I mean, people are passing this out left and right. It's going over the counter this year, so it's going to be easy to get. The problem with over the counter is it's going to cost about $50. So you can get it for free at a lot of different places. Harm Reduction Ohio will send it to you for free and also have an instructional video for you to watch. I wouldn't encourage anyone to pay $50 for it. Yeah. Well, they're sort of doing battle with each other, If the Narcan's in the brain and on those receptors, it's going to hold tight to them for a while, and the fentanyl can't sneak back in, even if they take more, okay? But once the Narcan sort of starts to wear off, that's why I say you got to call 911. But, fentanyl can slip back in there. Yeah, but just so you know, if someone's on the ground and you don't know why, maybe they have low blood sugar, maybe they drank too much, maybe they have a heart condition. If you give them Narcan, it's not going to do a thing. It's not going to make them high. It's not going to hurt them. It will just be like salt water in their nose. But if they happen to be on the ground not breathing because of an opioid, it's life-saving. Okay, so I've had a school nurse tell me before that they can't have this at their school because the kids will get it and will get high from it. And that is absolutely not how it works. You cannot get high from this stuff. It's not abusable. It just goes in there, finds an opioid on the receptor, and removes it. Okay. This is just another version, not that interesting, but they made this version at a higher dose. Some reports, rare, of people using opioids daily where they say we need to keep giving them naloxone. So they made this at a higher dose. I don't know. I sometimes think maybe it was just a little market grab, like let's make this and someone will buy it. But each box of Narcan that I showed you before has 2 doses in it already. But this one has a total of 16 milligrams. Definitely not needed in most cases. Okay, so when I talk to kids, I said, I need you to leave here with 3 things, or maybe 4, because I tell them number 0 on this slide is just don't take anything. Never take a pill or powder in this day and age. But then I say, if you ever did decide to do that, number 1, always test everything you're going to take. Test every pill and powder for fentanyl. If your test is positive, throw that stuff away. Do not mess with it. If your test is negative and you decide to move forward, this is where I worry about that 92 to 96% sensitive. If your test is negative and you decide to move forward, you have got to have what I call the new designated driver. You have got to have someone near you that knows you're taking something, and that person has to be sober. All right. And number 3, that person needs to know where the Narcan is. So let's say in a party setting, if kids listen to me, there's a person who has decided not to take anything that night, and they know, let's say a group of people are going to try some cocaine for the first time, but they know what we've told them, and they know someone's going to stay sober and know Narcan's nearby, and we've tested it, we think it's negative, but you know that 4% I worry about, then we have someone looking out for you. All right. And if they do all 3 of these things, I can almost guarantee them they will survive a fentanyl ingestion. It's heavy, isn't it? Yeah. It's not the 1970s anymore. That's for sure. But like I promised them is, I'm going to tell you about this in a second, but like I promised them is I'm going to leave you with an action plan. I'm going to leave you with hope. And if you do those 3 things, you might not be using a pill or powder right now as a junior in high school, but you don't know what you're going to be doing when you're 22. You don't know where you're going to be, parties you're going to be at. And that doesn't mean you will change from being a good person to a bad person. Like I said, everybody takes some risks in their life. And you'll know when you're 21 and at that next party, wait, that lady told me something. I need to test it first, or I need to not take it, or I need to have a buddy nearby. So this is our Birdie Box curriculum. This is the physical box. I mean, the bulk of it is a digital curriculum. We created a 4-lesson curriculum that a health teacher or any teacher could teach almost verbatim about fentanyl. A lot of it is similar to what I've told you tonight. And they can show an educational video. There's like little quizzes. I mean, we went all out. And it's, approved by educators, had high school principals go through it and gave us the thumbs up. So we have this available now. OSU Extension bought 16 of these and sent them out to rural high schools. You know, we can't go everywhere. So now their health teachers are using our curriculum to teach kids about fentanyl. And then you get a physical box in the mail. I have a sample here. It's just sort of some swag. You get posters for your nurse's office, a t-shirt for the health teacher, a sample of fentanyl test strips, and then, some flyers. So the digital curriculum is the most important thing, though. Yeah.
What's the pushback that you get from high schools that say, we're good?
Yeah.
We're not good. That's not,
No, they've said that. Yeah. Yeah.
So why in this time and day and age, because I think you've already said it, but they don't take it as serious as cancer
yeah.
or whatever. But what do you think?
Well, I appreciate the dilemma schools are in right now. I think a lot of schools have really hard, contentious school board meetings now. Parents are involved. Parents get upset about things. We had something scheduled at Dublin High School, and then they canceled because of just things are too contentious right now. We also, took us several meetings to get into Worthington High School. They had a parents event first, and then we did just the seniors. We couldn't talk to anyone else, just the seniors. But we did it. It took us a while. They were really worried. Some schools tell me they don't want me to mention fentanyl test strips or Narcan, which I'm not a big fan of, but I'll do it. I'm really flexible. So we can teach about the fentanyl crisis, teach about the pills, show the pictures, and leave it at that. So we try to work with schools and tailor it. My thinking is that kids need to know everything so they can make informed decisions, but I'm willing to work with any school. But I do get that pushback. Yeah. I've had a few people tell me we don't have a drug problem here. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I were talking about drunk driving, I wouldn't have as much of a problem. Yet we're losing more kids to fentanyl than we are to drunk driving. So it's just that stigma. The conversation needs to change. We need to move it mainstream. And we're getting there, but it's taken a lot of work. So I'll skip that. So let me tell you about our name, and then I'll take any more questions. So Our name is unique. People always ask me where it came from. So when Eli was in middle school, he and his buddies called themselves the Birdies. It was just a silly 7th grade thing, group of maybe like 8 boys. And it carried through high school, and at his memorial service in our backyard, a bunch of them wrote notes to him. We miss you, Birdie. We love you, Birdie. And so Olivia and I, my daughter, thought, let's pull that in. It's quirky like Eli. And so we wrote the word birdie, and I said, well, why don't we draw a bird that is a canary, like the canary in the coal mine, goes down in the mine to check for oxygen, like the test strips, or like education. And I wrote that word out, BirdieLight. And after I wrote it, I said, wait a minute, Eli's in the middle. ELI is right in the middle, and that was not planned. It happened. He's in the middle of everything we do. You guys have never met him, but I do hope you can take his message with you and tell your nieces, your nephews, your kids, your cousins, whoever needs to know more about fentanyl.